Several years ago, I went with some friends in Lincoln, Nebraska to watch The Musketeer. They charged me money for it, which was highway robbery, because it was literally the worst thing I've ever seen, ever. There is a sequence where the hero is climbing up the side of a tower to go and rescue a maiden. This has nothing to do with anything, but I'm telling you anyway. And the people who are in the tower to protect the maiden look down at the rope that's attached right there in front of them. They're like, oh, that guy's climbing up here. We should throw our own ropes out and go down there and sword fight with him. Cut the rope! So I'm walking out of there with a couple of my friends, and we're all making fun of this terrible movie. And I, unlike the other two, had made a mistake on my trip to Lincoln, Nebraska. I was wearing my University of Colorado Buffaloes hat, and some angry, drunken Nebraskan miscreants cruised by, saw the hat, and targeted me unfairly. They took crumpled up beer cans from their car and hurled them in my direction. I could have been struck. They shouted the F word and gave me the middle finger, which means the F word. Then they peeled out and drove away, and I was just left there embarrassed and ashamed and hurting. And that's the worst instance of discrimination that I can think of in my entire life. Okay, let's be honest. I've had it pretty easy. But there are people who haven't. I remember when I first saw a picture of actual discrimination, which was in school somewhere when I saw this picture from 1957 of when the Arkansas schools desegregated. And this young gal is supposed to go to school here, and that's the whole reason that everybody's freaking out and yelling and screaming at her and violence is occurring, is because she's going to school where she's supposed to go to school. And I remember asking my teacher about it and really wrestling with how recent that was and how dark that situation was. Some of my youthful optimism about human nature was crushed the day I saw this photo for the first time. It's also intuitive to a lot of people to say, wait, that's messed up. And if we step beyond our tribal boundaries, it's pretty easy for us to know that, hey, even if you disagree with somebody or don't like their tendencies or how they do stuff, you still just can't be horrible to them because then you're the problem. Well, Paul finds himself in a situation just like that in Acts chapter 16. He's been discriminated against, he's been denied basic civil liberties, and illegal, horrible things have been done to his body for no good reason and without due process of law. And now, in this tiny little addendum to this big story in Acts chapter 16, we're going to get to see the satisfying moment where Paul confronts the people who wronged them, and they have to eat buckets of crow. We're in Acts chapter 16, verses something through something else. It's on the screen. Go ahead and read that thing. It'll make more sense if you do. I'm Matt. It's 10 Minute Bible Hour. Here we go. There's a cohesive story here. The fast version is Paul got in trouble with the government for absolutely no reason whatsoever. Without thinking about it, they just had him flogged and thrown in jail, which is just like their default thing. Then, as has happened so often in Acts, there was a miraculous thing. Paul is freed from jail, but doesn't run. The jailer assumes he's going to run, and so the jailer goes to kill himself. Paul's like, hey, don't kill yourself. And the guy's like, I want to become a Christian. That was pretty efficient, actually. In verse 35, it's time to let bygones be bygones. You got flogged a little bit. We had to pay for a night of you in jail. I think everybody was a little wrong. Let's move on. Verse 35. When it was daylight, the magistrates sent their officers to the jailer with the order, release those men. Verse 36. The jailer told Paul, the magistrates have ordered that you and Silas be released. Now you can leave. Go in peace. And it's like this happy, congratulatory, great news. Your insane, power-hungry overlords who indiscriminately flogged you have decided to let you move on, even though they have absolutely no grounds for detaining you whatsoever. This is a real win for you. This is so screwed up. Paul didn't do anything. It's not even like he got a traffic stop and had to sit there for an extra 20 minutes and he missed an appointment. He got flogged! He had his back turned into hamburger and had to spend the night in this awful situation. This is nuts! And Paul is not real eager to take it. We'll get to that in a second. What's interesting is we've seen so many occasions where, like we were talking about last episode, where you get the impression that this human institution is going to slow down whatever it is that God appears to be doing in the book of Acts. And it just does not work. So we can expect that since every time there's been a miraculous release from custody, there's been a public humiliation of those who imagine themselves to be more authoritative or powerful than God, that we're going to get another one of those here in just a minute. And it comes in the form of Paul pushing back on their illegal, unethical, awful behavior. Verse 37. But Paul said to the officers, they beat us publicly without a trial, even though we're Roman citizens, and threw us into prison, and now they want to get rid of us quietly? No, Let them come themselves and escort us out. Yes, call those people out. People shouldn't be allowed to do stuff like that to other people, even if they can hide behind the facade of legality. They're trying to do that, but it's not even legal. You can't just beat a Roman citizen. Now, maybe they didn't know he was a Roman citizen, but they didn't bother to ask. Yeah, you can go to prison for what you did to me. If I want to make an issue of it, it's going to be a problem. Now, in the United States, you can't just do corporal punishment on somebody without a trial. Nobody shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property except by due process of law. If you skip that by due process of law thing, it's just assault. It's just robbery. It's just kidnapping. And they skipped that due process of law thing. But Paul's smart and a citizen. He's going to call it out. No. This won't go away quietly. You may get rid of me when you take me by the hand and we walk arm in arm to the edge of the city in front of everyone, and you own what you did. I love it. Verse 38. The officers reported this to the magistrates, and when they heard that Paul and Silas were Roman citizens, they were alarmed. Mild understatement. Verse 39. They came to appease them and escorted them from prison, requesting them to leave the city. After Paul and Silas came out of the prison, they went to Lydia's house, where they met with the brothers and encouraged them. Then they left. Isn't it interesting how this whole thing gets flipped around? We had a reversal in the last passage too. The one who was in a position of authority and control over the other one's life, the jailer to Paul, ended up being in a position of needing grace from Paul to end up not dead. All Paul had to do to effectively kill that guy was just flee the jail, but he didn't. And here again, we see a reversal of authority, where Paul looks like the one who is the meek, humble, frightened, hat in the hand, I really hope the Jesus things work out kind of guy. Instead, he turns out to be a part of the juggernaut thing that we talked about last time. And God blows up another human institution, and this one happens in kind of a comical way. In the end, I love that Paul and Silas are like, yeah, thanks for the beatdown, but we're not quite ready to leave Philippi. We had some people we're going to talk to, so we'll just have you go with us, and we'll go visit the people we want to visit, and now we will leave on our terms. I don't think Paul and Silas were being smug or obnoxious. Paul and Silas set the stage for people who are to come later with the same message. They set them up for success. They demonstrate grace in a language that these authority figures would have spoken. Uh-oh, you got me over a barrel now, but you're not going to take advantage of it. And they do the whole thing in a very public way, which is, to me, one of the most interesting aspects of what we see happening in both the accounts of Luke and Acts, is that so much of what unfolds happens in front of a ton of people, so that we know we aren't getting these stories from just one guy who vaguely remembers it. We're getting these stories from sources that could be verified hundreds of times over, because everybody saw this play out the way it did. In a way, we had a miraculous power encounter between God and nature, like brick walls and chains. And then we have a political power encounter between political grace and controlling statism. Last thought. This is Micah 6:8. Justice, mercy, humility. That seems to be stuff that God is into. And you'll notice that the people who advocate the gospel throughout Luke and Acts advocate it in that way. You'll notice that the people who are clearly the bad guys throughout Luke and Acts constantly resort to violence and riots and political force to get their way, even though their idea just isn't good enough to stand on its own. If there's a little tiny take home in a passage like this, it's if you're into the whole God Jesus thing, constantly resorting to force to make the whole God Jesus gospel church thing happen kind of undermines the actual message of the whole gospel Jesus grace mercy church thing. I think that made sense. I had fun with this one. I hope you did too. If you like this channel in general, or even if you only sort of like it, I'd be hyper grateful if you would pass it along to somebody who you think might enjoy it, and also if you would subscribe. Last thing, if you haven't checked out the new Ephesians series yet, you should completely go do that, because it has my friend Aaron in it, and he's infinitely smarter than me, and he says smart things about a thing, and it's a different format. And you're gonna like it. I'm shutting up. I'm Matt, 10-Minute Bible Hour. See you soon.